Good evening. Welcome to State of Affairs here on GHOne Television. I am Franz Zaban. Tonight we have a special conversation for you. In the last 5 days, we have seen quite a major disruption in the provision of internet services across our lives, from browsing the internet, surfing the net, social media, banking transactions. Everything you will use the internet to do has been terribly affected in the last 5 days. It's caused many to ask questions, many to ask whether or not it's an awakening for us to look at how much of our digital backbone we have strengthened, how much more work is needed, and how come this has impacted us this much. We will try and unpack that for you here on our discussions tonight, as well as share with you a very, very, very important matter. It's got to do with renal health for our children and children on dialysis and the pain that they're going through. We'll share that with you tonight as well here on State of Affairs. Welcome once again. I'm Francis Aban, and the show is brought to you by the kind of MTN. MTN is everywhere you go, as well as Carbo Coffee and Coa Mixture as well. So once again, thank you for joining us. We'll begin with the updates in Parliament today. Turns out that many were asking questions about what the sector minister, Ursula Osokufo, had to say about the interruption that we had seen from last week Thursday on the internet interruptions, or should I say the blackout that happened on Thursday, and the blackout has been reducing bit by bit. Now it's getting a little better. But what happened? Here's what the minister had to say on the floor of Parliament.
By chance, there are two cables that have been unaffected: the Google Equiano cable and the Angola to Brazil cables. Both, however, cannot support the lost capacity with the same levels of quality and the same latency within a reasonable time. It's truly unprecedented for all of these cables to be cut around the same time, and no one could have anticipated that. In 2020, during the COVID pandemic, the National Communications Authority engaged the mobile network operators and internet service providers to assess their current capacities and redundancies to submarine cable providers and ensure that they had the necessary environment to provide reliable services to all subscribers. The NCA then realized that the MNOs and broadband wireless access providers were connected to only one or two submarine cable providers. And in order to mitigate any risk from a national emergency point of view, the NCA directed the MNOs and Surfline in a letter dated 30th April 2020, a copy of which is attached, to establish and maintain physical cable connections to at least 3 submarine cable providers operating in Ghana. They also indicated in the directive that all redundant cable connections should be capable of being lighted within 24 hours in the event of outage on their primary links. All the network operators complied, and MTN is connected to the ACE cable, WAX and Main 1. Telecel is connected now to SAT3, WAX and the ACE cable. AT is connected to Main 1 and ACE. However, in their case, they are connected to the WAX cable through the West African Ocean Company, WAIOC, in Nigeria. So in addition to the 2 cables that they have in country, they are connected to a third one, which is providing services through Nigeria. And so not only did AT comply, they went further to establish and maintain a physical connection to an external submarine cable provider that did not land in Ghana. They acquired this additional service from WAIOC through the WAX cable, as I have indicated. And this provides connectivity from Nigeria also through the Equiano cable. As a result of this, at the height of the outage, AT had a better service while the other MNOs had degraded services. Also, at the time of the outage, MTN had provisioned a separate 70 gigabits per second capacity over the wax cable to Nigeria. And this facility was used to maintain a minimum local cash exchange with the internet community as well in Nigeria, and was repurposed for partial MTN internet data services when all 4 subsea cable providers in Ghana had complete outage on Thursday. Preliminary findings and further investigations of this fault have revealed that the fault occurred due to external incidents that resulted in cuts on the submarine cable systems in the Atlantic Ocean, offshore Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal along the coast of West Africa and Portugal. The subsea cable landing service providers have remotely identified the approximate locations of the damage, and they've made preparations to dispatch repair vessels to the locations for physical assessment and restoration.
And that's the Sector Minister, Ursula Owusu-Ekufo. Well, that detail she gave on the floor drew a response or a reaction from the minority in Parliament. Haruna Idris is the former minority leader.
Our capacity is around 1.5 gigabytes of data capacity owing to multiple undersea cable cuts. As we can, many other African countries, including Ivory Coast, Liberia, Benin, Burkina Faso, Togo, Cameroon, Gabon, Namibia, and Niger are all affected, including Nigeria. But, Mr. Speaker, what the minister have done is to lay bare or naked the lack of redundancy in Ghana and the lack of internet capacity in Ghana and the lack of domestic internet capacity in Ghana and our continuous heavy reliance on external connectivity. That is what she's done. But, Mr. Speaker, as a country, she needs every support. As I listened to her, she said we will. When you say we will, you and who? This is an industry largely led by the private sector. Even you, if you were to require money tomorrow to fix Ghana's internet capacity, will you find it from the government of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance? These are the bare issues we should look at. This is an industry which is largely private sector driven. We need to create an enabling environment for them to expand access. That as government, you are commending Meta. How much did the government of Ghana contribute to the Meta 45 kilometers? No, zero. You have no contribution. Again, a dependency. Now, Mr. Speaker, whilst looking at this matter, in the last few days, since Thursday, as you rightly pointed, 14th Thursday, Mr. Speaker, this is a major wake-up call for Ghana. The banking sector could almost ground to a halt. Academic, internet, online connectivity ground to a halt. Electricity ground to a halt. All of it attributable to an internet cut of a submarine cable. I still recall SAT3 Vodafone Glow main cable was launched at Osuyi, a main one was launched. We've had 2 more additions to it. But, Mr. Speaker, I only agree with the recommendations that we must look within.
Well, the Sector Minister, Ursula Owusu-Ekufo, had cause to respond to questions about if fiber cables or fiber optic cables are not working at the minute, what about what's being proffered? Starlink. Is that possible? Here's a response.
The NCA did not have a licensing framework for satellite operators because no satellite operated a retail service directly to customers here. There are companies that will procure satellite services for onward distribution to their subscribers, but it wasn't direct to the consumer. Starlink wanted to have a direct to the consumer kind of regime within which to work, and so the NCA had to look at what had been done in other jurisdictions and come up with a framework that would enable them to work with Starlink, and not just Starlink but others, to also utilize their services here.
I know many of you have a thing or two to say about the response relative to Starlink and the arrangements and what the minister has explained. But Sam George, a member of the Communications Committee in Ghana's Parliament, had this to say after all the explanation given by the Sector Minister on why we are where we are with the internet disruption from last Thursday.
I hold the view that we are where we are simply because the regulator that works under the minister failed to do their job. The responsibility rests with the regulator. This is not about another country and force majeure. A regulator doing its job would have put in place the mechanisms and the redundancies that would have allowed us to be prepared for this instance. Mr. Speaker, the cut happened off the coast of Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire was the most impacted country on Thursday. As we speak today, Cote d'Ivoire's recovery is ahead of Ghana, simply because their regulator had put in place the right mechanisms. In the case of AT, and if you ask what Cote d'Ivoire is doing, they're using MOVE, the MOVE operator cable. They've immediately allowed all the other operators to piggyback on MOVE. When you speak about the success of AT is simply able to carry traffic because they have redundancy using the Nigerian link. But is that not supposed to be a prerequisite for all the other operators in the country? Who is supposed to monitor that? It is the regulator. So if the regulator has slept on his job, and today we are found in this position, and then we want to raise our hands up in the air and say, oh, other countries that were affected have recovered and are recovering faster than Ghana because their regulators are proactive. Our regulator today is competing with the Ghana Chamber of Telecom. The Ghana Chamber of Telecom serves the interest of the telecom companies and is their advocate. The Ghanaian regulator is supposed to be the advocate for the rights, the NTA, the national.
That's the deputy ranking member on the Communications Committee in Ghana's Parliament and MP for Ningo Pram, Sam George there. Okay, so we've heard all that from Parliament, the sector minister's statement on what's happening and the update, the answer on Starlink, then the minorities' take on why all this is happening and the matter of investment into our infrastructure. But let's get an overview on all of this tonight. Joining us via Zoom is the Vice President of Imani Africa, Mr. Salon Brantier. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you for joining us here on State of Affairs.
Good evening, fellow viewers. I hope everybody's fine and I can be reached loud
and clear. Yes, the internet will be kind to us tonight. I hope so. All right. So, Salon, I guess my very first question to you is: I've heard everybody talk about what's wrong. But for the average Joe tonight, who saw the disruption from Thursday till now, what is the problem? What really is this?
Well, I think the major problem is that our internet coverage that we have in this country is mainly limited to what we call gateways. These gateways come from fiber optic lines that come into the country. They come from the sea, and then they terminate at the coast, from which those who provide us internet, like the MNOs. When I say MNOs, I'm talking about Airtel. I'm talking about Airtel Tigo or AT now. I'm talking about MTN. I'm talking about Vodafone, which is now Telecel. They provide us internet through our mobile phones and other devices, and so basically what is happening now is that because the subsea cables were cut, hold on a sec. Oops. Because the subsea
So,
we had an issue where the internet was not working very well, and a lot of thousands or maybe about millions of subscribers were cut off. Now, what this caused was that because we're not able to get the internet from the sea, from the subsea cables, about 25% of internet was only available to Ghanaians. And this was mostly through Airtel Tigo's line, because that was the only line that was active. All the other ones which took from SAT3 and other sources were cut off. So this is a national situation that happened. We know now that there were disruptions from Portugal all the way through Senegal, and then Abidjan. And these cuts affected us seriously because then most of our fiber optic internet is derived from the Africa-Europe line. All across Africa, we normally get from Africa and Europe or from Asia, but the Asian one is for the East African side of the continent, while the West African side always takes from Europe. So that is what happened in a nutshell. Basically, what is happening now is that some of it has been restored because everybody is now linking to the Google fiber optic line in Ghana, as well as the main one line, which was supplying Airtel and Glo. So basically now everybody is piggybacking on that. But then what is happening is that because these are the only two ones left, all the internet service providers are now linked to that one, which means that we are not getting as much bandwidth as we want. Bandwidth here basically means the number of connections or the speed of connections that will allow us to get high-speed internet. So basically what we are doing is that we are splitting the internet amongst so many people, but the pie of the internet is not as great as it used to be before the cables were cut. Unfortunately, for these cables to be fixed, it's going to be a huge logistic maneuver. It is going to take about 4 to 5 weeks, as it was said or announced earlier, for internet to be restored to what it was before this crisis came about. This is because they need to send ships to deploy, find out where the faults exactly are, and then after finding where the faults are, restore the fiber optic cables, and then test everything to see if it's back to normal. And that's a very huge logistic undertaking because you would have to let the ships, first of all, get the right equipment, get the right divers and related people, and then deploy them to find out where the faults are and make sure that similar faults will not happen again. And all of these are unplanned, which means that it's going to take quite a long time. And it's also even dependent on even minor things like the weather, because even how the weather is at the point where the breaks are will determine how we'll be able to fix these fiber optic networks. So in a nutshell, what we have is something that was never thought of as possible, but something that is happening due to the fact that we do not have what we call backups or redundancies beyond what we have in terms of the fiber optic. So it's like what we call a single point of failure. Once that point is cut off, there is no remedy or no solution, and we would only have to wait for the situation to be fixed or remedied by the service providers or those who provide the cables that connect to our shores.
All right. You talked about redundancies, but let me ask it this way. If these happenings are as a result of these cables that have been, ruptured or destroyed some way, somehow, is this something that is the first that we have seen in the world? And how do countries that know that this is possible prepare for such eventualities? Could this have been managed a lot better than what we have seen?
Yes, I think this is not the first time there has even been such a disruption in Ghana. There was quite a while back, I've forgotten in which year, but within the last 10 years, we had a similar issue. And at that time, the only fiber optic gateway was the one run by Sat3, that's the Vodafone. And that's the then Vodafone, which is now Telecel. And it caused a major disruption, but I think that was solved in a shorter period of time because it was a more localized problem. For many other parts of the world, there are so many sources from which you get internet. There's a terrestrial one or the broadband one, which is where the cables are laid into the ground. I mean, from the sea, they are laid into the ground before they are picked up by the various distribution networks. And there are also satellite networks. I remember back in the day, in the the late 90s to early 2000s, even all the way up to 2010, before broadband really became mainstream, one of the faster means of internet was by satellite. There were several satellite providers back then, and those days you had to use either C-band, they were called C-band or KU-band satellites, which were similar to what we had for DSTV dishes back then. And these ones picked the signal from satellites that were in space, and they were very expensive, and they are still very expensive. However, what has happened is that for most countries, they have prioritized the internet as a major, channel for national commerce or national security or for communication, and therefore they do not restrict heavily players that want to enter a particular market to ensure that internet is always, there are other options provided. In our case in Ghana, however, we have always had a restrictive nature. In fact, I side very much with what Honorable Sam George was alluding to in Parliament in his address, that the National Communications Authority, which is the regulator of the space, has been too restrictive in the expansion of internet services across the nation. Seeing that you have a lot of private providers that want to provide internet, the restrictions that we have, first of all, to allow them to sign into the market, how much they have to pay to get spectrum, the kind of frustrations they go through, which are never addressed, as well as even the many hoops that the NCA has been putting in the way of these providers, means that you have a situation where the regulatory regime is very restrictive. But you see, we need as many players as possible. First of all, because it enhances competition, and then it reduces the effect of all of us having to rely on only one service provider. In this particular scenario, for instance, 75% of our internet was knocked off one early morning, just because about 75% of our internet is provided by just two entities, which is MTN as well as Telecel. In the case of Telecel, former Vodafone, their services were knocked off completely, whilst MTN had very limited service. And it were only very lucky that Airtel had a different service provider for its fiber optic. And that is why we were even able to have some semblance of internet across the country. Now, if we had decided that we would diversify the playing field and allow those with the some of the biggest heft in terms of service provision across the world, like the famed Starlink that everybody's talking about, if we had created a regulatory regime that would allow those people to come in, they would not have had this problem. Note that as recently as December, the NCA issued a very strong worded statement saying that anybody who sold Starlink devices was engaging in illegalities and so on and so forth. When other countries have embraced some of these service providers, and they provide essential backups for something as important as the internet. And I believe that this is a very big lesson, especially for the Ministry of Communications as well as the regulator, because now they have realized that the disruptions that have been caused and how hard it hit the economy means that those restrictions that they were putting in place to prevent people from coming to the space were unfounded. We need as many of them as possible, provided they provide quality service and the terms of service that consumers prefer or want or can afford, which is the main thing. Let them come in and let us decide whether we can afford them or not. And then that will determine how we can also always be able to have what we call redundancies or alternatives. Because we did not have any of these redundancies or alternatives, a lot of big businesses were in very serious trouble. For example, there are studies that show that in a country like Ghana, when the internet is shut down, like what happened a couple of days ago, the whole economy loses at least $12 million a day. Can you imagine that you are in a situation where already there are a lot of economic challenges, and then the economy loses $12 million a day? $12 million not only to government, but also to businesses and individuals who are now trying to provide services of value addition to their particular services to serve a nation which is a developing nation like Ghana, which is now beginning to adopt more digitized measures of doing business. So these are some of the big issues that I believe that lay right on the doorstep of the Ministry of Communications as well as the regulator, which is the NCA.
All right. We'll go for a short break now, but when we return, Salon, we'll be looking at, now we're told that things will be fully restored in 5 weeks. What happens between now and then? What's that talk that we need to come around to in terms of the digital infrastructure we need to build, on which some will say the software of digitalization becomes a reality that is not threatened by any kind of either force majeure or any trouble in the future. We will discuss that after the break. Stay with us.
To every resident in our vibrant regions, brace yourself for an unforgettable and transformative journey with Nana Kwame Bediako as he embarks on the groundbreaking regional listening tour. From bustling cities to the serene landscapes of Ghana, say hello to a leader who genuinely listens to your concerns, dreams, and hopes for a better community and country. A leader who is ready to get things moving again with you and by you. Nana Kwame Bediako, banga sankasa, bona yena zoa nwanan oliba. He's coming live and colored to your communities. Get ready. It's your time to be heard.
Hello? Bye.
Well, everybody's heard about the bird. Bird, I bet it's the bird of the night. Bird is the bird of the night. Don't you know about the bird? Well, everybody knows that the bird is the bird of the night. Bird, I bet it's the bird.
To consider the implications.
Hello? Everybody knows that the bird is the word. You bring the bird, a bird, a bird. Are you to stop freedom? Are you gone? You can't stop freedom.
To every resident in our vibrant regions, brace yourself for an unforgettable and transformative journey with Nana Kwame Bediako as he embarks on the groundbreaking regional listening tour. From bustling cities to the serene landscapes of Ghana, say hello to a leader who genuinely listens to your concerns, dreams, and hopes for a better community and country. A leader who is ready to get things moving again with you and by you. Nana Kwame Bediako, banga sankasa, bona yena zoa nwanan oliba. He's coming live and colored to your communities. Get ready. It's your time to be heard.
Thanks for staying with us. You're watching State of Affairs Radio on GHOne Television. I am Francis Zaban. Tonight, as I said, we're discussing the matter to do with the internet disruptions or the blackout that we saw from Thursday and how it's been gradually restored and where really the issue is and how we address it. Salom Branti is with us. He's the Vice President of GHOne Africa. So, Salom, I was coming to the matter of as a country. So, even by what you've explained, the fiber optic infrastructure that we have, is this something that we have some measure of control over as a country? Have we invested enough in this infrastructure as hardware that in the event of any problem, today's force majeure could be one other thing tomorrow? Are we in a position where we have a grip on our digital backbone or the infrastructure that keeps everything on?
So most people think that a fiber optic network is purely in the domain of a state. I mean, most people in Ghana. However, it is a matter of a function of private investment, and then seeing your market as a big market for internet service provision. Ghana was one of the first in Africa to adopt the internet back in 1995, August 1995, I think. And we had been pioneers for a very long time in many different areas when it came to internet adoption. However, we have been overtaken very aggressively by countries like Senegal, Nigeria, even La Côte d'Ivoire, etc. Because down the line we have sort of slacked in our ability to have or build upon our successes. And this is because, you see, it's a competition. Ghana has a population of 32 million people. A country like Nigeria has a population of 150 plus million people. Senegal, all the rest have smaller populations. However, if you have a regulatory regime where these markets are very hard to penetrate or enter or be successful in, other people will invest elsewhere. And I think that has been the situation that has been happening for a while. We just have to create a climate that is conducive enough for people or for those who are investing in fiber optic cables to be able to terminate on our shores so that we can have cheaper, faster internet. Because the truth of the matter is that any fiber optic layout that comes to Ghana or terminates in Ghana is going to cost nothing less than about $500 to $1 billion, depending on where it's coming from. It could even cost more. So such people would need to have some kind of return on investment in the very near future and the full assurance that they'll be able to get their money back. So these are some of the scenarios that are very important before you can have that kind of external, internet coming into your shores. For internal, internet penetration or fiber optic networks, or however we choose to call it, or the backbone, we had done quite a lot of work by 2007 when Voltacom, which was part of a subsidiary of Vodafone, had lines, fiber optic cables down all the way to from Akosombo to other parts of the country. I even know, for example, that one of Gridco's business models is to have fiber optic cables run across some of their their electric lines, so as to be able to make use of the already existing infrastructure, which is electric wires and all of that. However, one of the biggest difficulties for a lot of local telco companies that have been putting fiber optic cables in town is the fact that these cables are cut very often either by criminals or by other shady characters, because just 1 meter of fiber optic cable is extremely expensive, but however the data it takes is about maybe 1,000 times what a copper pipe the same size will take. So that is why people prefer the fiber optic cable, because the amount of signal that goes through it, if we're going to use copper cables, we use a very huge bundle for the same lines. There has been significant investments by the telcos. I believe that it is time we look at how we can shield the telcos and these investments and keep them growing, instead of having the telcos being frustrated by there's so many disruptions that happen. And I think some of it is also some of the reasons why we have not been able to have the fiber optic locally extended as much as possible is because of the fact that we do not have very clear municipal approaches to how these cables can be laid, because most of them are laid underground. So even where to pass them is a problem because of the way we have a porous road structure, and there's very poor planning, there's very poor urban planning. So all of these things come together and create a whole big set of problems for people who want to expand. However, it is now time for countries in West Africa to be able to come together and invest or pool resources together, and also build systems that would be able to, let's say, launch satellites, for example, or collaborate with some of the biggest providers like Google, like Elon Musk's Starlink, and other satellite service providers, to be able to put 1 or 2 satellites in the air that would also serve as backups for what we have in terms of our terrestrial or ground networks. And I also believe that this is also the point where we need to incentivize companies that can provide such services to do so, either by tax breaks or whatever, because now it is very clear and apparent that for our country to develop to the next step, or even to keep even at its current pace of development, we would need to have to see internet as a critical backbone, as important as you have roads. Because what we have in this scenario in Ghana now is like having 10 airports in the country, but only one airport being able to do international flights. When you have a situation like that, it is very difficult to convert any of the other local airports to international airports without significant investment. So instead of having one airport, we should be able to have like 10 different airports of limited size and capacities, but being able to do international flights. That's the kind of analogy I can put in place. And then also locally, we should also encourage especially the banks and the more strategic institutions to be able to have data centers or what we call mirrored sites or cloud services domiciled locally, such that even when there is an international blackout or we cannot talk to the rest of the world, we can at least talk to each other. Because basically, what is the internet? The internet is a connection of various smaller computer networks into one large network. So it's kind of what we call something like an arterial system, or where everyone is interconnected with everyone. So there are different levels of it, so that at least at the local level, we have a whole bunch of important services that are critical to this nation's stability and security already running locally. And this would mean that stakeholders would have to come together. The government, mobile, internet service providers, civil society, other regulators in the various spaces like banking, etc. I think I saw a circular this evening where some of these strategic players came together to have meetings. And this is where we need to really step up and begin to look at some kind of proactive measures, a national disaster recovery plan that will ensure that we are not kicked off the grid, and we are not kicked off connecting to the rest of the world, even in case of a crisis, because some of these things will be very important if we have any stability in the very near future. All we can do now is hope that the NCA will broadly collaborate with the current ISPs there to be able to pool. What we say, when we say pool, we say that to be able to allow the current providers who can provide into the country successfully, to ensure that everybody can get a quota that can fill in to support their subscribers. I think that has already begun. That is why companies like Telecel and MTN are able to give service to their providers. But I believe that more can be done to ensure that pooling or that particular recovery is done faster. And then with better results than we have right now, so that we can quickly get back on track. And then also, now we can then begin to lobby some of the bigger providers that are targeting West Africa with incentives for them to use Ghana as a main gateway or as a docking point or a landing point for further internet services. This might probably even mean saying that we are giving them passage for them to go into landlocked countries like Burkina Faso and Niger from our coast, which would then mean that by doing so, we can give them conditionalities that they can also expand some of the services even in other parts of the country, like in the northern parts of the country where there are very few fiber optic networks available.
All right, Salam, thank you so much for the thoughts that you shared with us this evening. There's another part of this conversation that we need to look at, but let me also introduce Derek Lai. He's joined us this evening. He's the managing partner for eConsult 101. Good evening to you, Derek.
Thank you very much.
I trust you're well. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'll go for a short break. When I return, look, yes, it's happened. Yes, there's talk of could we have avoided this or could we have handled this much better? Are there real conversations that we're not paying attention to? We'll try and get some answers tonight before we wrap up. Stay with us.
Are you to stop freedom? Are you gone? You can't stop freedom.
To every resident in our vibrant regions, brace yourself for an unforgettable and transformative journey with Nana Kwame Bediako as he embarks on the groundbreaking regional listening tour. From bustling cities to the serene landscapes of Ghana, say hello to a leader who genuinely listens to your concerns, dreams, and hopes for a better community and country. A leader who is ready to get things moving again with you and by you. Nana Kwame Bediako, Banga Sankasa, Bona Yena Zoa, Nwanan Oliba. He's coming live and color to your communities. Get ready. It's your time to be heard.
Are you to stop freedom? Are you gone? You can't stop freedom.
A goal to every resident in our vibrant regions. Brace yourself for an unforgettable and transformative journey with Nana Kwame Bediako as he embarks on the groundbreaking regional listening tour. From bustling cities to the serene landscapes of Ghana, say hello to a leader who genuinely listens to your concerns, dreams, and hopes for a better community and country. A leader who is ready to get things moving again with you and by you. Nana Kwame Bediako, Banga Sankasa, Bona Yena Zoa, Nwanan Oliba. He's coming live and colored to your communities. Get ready. It's your time to be heard.
Final leg of our conversations tonight. As I said, we're talking about the internet disruptions and Ghana's digitalization drive. Two quick questions before we wrap it all up. Derek, let me start with you. So there's been a lot of talk about, okay, fiber optic has got its own disruptions. We're in trouble. We've been cut off somewhat. It will take 5 weeks for us to get to optimal levels. But there's talk of a certain alternative called Starlink and others. I'm hearing OneWeb and others as well. Are these strong, viable options that everybody should be canvassing and saying that that's the way to go?
Okay, so listening to the minister address Parliament today, it was refreshing to hear her mention that finally the long-awaited framework has been even approved by the NCA board. That means that at this stage, it obviously has to go through the minister to give another final approval. Then we can be able to see Starlink and Co also licensed. But she said what is also interesting to note was she also mentioned that OneWeb has already been licensed. So it means that some level of interest has gone on with regards to getting a framework in place to be able to support satellite operators as well to be able to provide their services here. Interestingly, satellite is in space. So as of now, some of these services already work here. The likes of Starlink work here, just that you have to roam on them. So these are roaming services, and the likes of Nigeria have approved it long ago. So the moment Nigeria approved it, the signal on the one in Ghana was completely enhanced because they put, I think, a node in Lekki, and so it just cuts across the Ivory Coast. All the way through, it just goes all the way through.
So it's already.
So no, you can see the signal. It's not. The signal is there, and so it's just that the NCA. I understand that, like the minister rightly said, they want to be able to put a proper licensing framework, because with the licensing framework, then you can be able to also charge fees. But the truth is, and what we need to put on the table is that Starlink cannot replace, or OneWeb or any other satellite service cannot replace our MTNs, our Telecells, our Airtel Tigos, because of the latency that's required to be able to provide those services. So you can be on. That's why the minister says that it can become a backup. And I think that's what I've said since last week, that license it, let it become a backup. Another disincentive is that it's expensive.
Okay.
And even as we
comparative to what we already have.
Oh yes, it's way expensive. To be able to have a kit right now, not through a middleman, yourself, it's not going to set you back anything around, let's say, $1,100.
Okay.
To be able to get a kit.
That's a kit.
Yes, and be able to maybe get on a month service. Standard monthly services is about, let's say, $200 every month.
Okay.
But you're getting about 3 times what the market speeds are right now. as people are going to get on it, obviously it might dip, but even if it dips and it's even like one half what the market speeds are, it's still going to be
it's still
going to be a game changer on the market. So when people can keep them as backup. So because I've been saying this since last week, if we had Starlink licensed, even during the outages, at least companies that need the resource can be able to acquire them. They can be able to acquire them, banks, the media houses, so that they can do their work and stay productive during the periods of the outage, while we try and look for those redundancies. Rather than we have a complete blackout, there's an option for satellite, but it's not there because we are not ready with the framework. So it's refreshing to know that that framework is ready, and I'm hopeful that maybe within Q2 we can be able to see it officially out there for us to have a launch of these players.
We've had conversations in the past about the regulator, the NCA, and issues to do with how spectrum is managed, how investments are made in the telecom space. Is this an example here that the NCA must look to have a second look at how it's regulating the market and allowing the MNOs to invest a bit more and be given leeway to grow much better than they are now?
So that's another wide question. For me, just to say that I think that the NCA is doing its best to be able to regulate the space, because, you know, even when you are bringing in new players, conversations come in there. And it was also good to know, when we're talking about satellite just now, the minister said that the framework has gone through industry consultation to be able to get certain kinds of alignments with the people that have paid spent billions of dollars and paid millions and dollars of licenses to be able to operate in this market, for them to also say, okay, maybe there's a room for them to also come and fix themselves in there. And that means that industry consultation has gone on for satellite technology. But more importantly, I think that from a general perspective, I think that the NCA is doing its best. However, I can be able to do a bit more. Because this outage, for the want of a better word, if you compare what we saw, people were saying Airtel Tigo was working and all of those things. I think because they also have some redundancy partners with some Eastern African markets, so they were able to connect quickly. I think even there was also one service provider, one ISP, that was able to connect within 1 hour, get immediate redundancy within 1 hour. But most of the existing major players were all on the 4 fiber, or either the 4 or the 3 major fiber cables, and that means that there's the need for regulatory look over putting all your assets in one direction, rather than looking at. So it's the question of the lessons that should be learned from this experience goes beyond just the rhetoric about it's an act of God, or maybe it's a force majeure and all of that. But there's also technical conversations that should be learned, because if you place fiber cables on seabeds, and then it's supposed to expect that there can be some seismic activities sometimes and all of those things, and that kind of, I believe, maintenance and all of those things should be able to prevent some of these experiences. And we are looking into the future where the regulator can work with the service providers. Service providers should look at their redundancies and be able to build proper enhanced redundancies in such a way that we don't probably maybe suffer, let's say, close to 72 hours of major downtime before we get back into things beginning to pick up. And that's one of the things I think that the regulator can do.
Salam, I'll ask you this, since we've touched quite a lot on what I just discussed. I've heard people say that, okay, should this in any way have us relook the entire idea or the entire move towards us fully digitalizing? Because in situations like this, you notice that you are down, you are cut off from the rest of the world. A lot of the things that you used to do with the Internet of Things become a challenge. What do you say to that perspective as well? Salam, are you with us?
Yes, I'm saying what exactly is the perspective? Are you saying that digitalization, should we stop digitalization?
No. They're saying that we should build a stronger backbone on which the digitalization drive hovers on. And that's
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we are at a stage where we cannot dodge anything with regards to digitizing or digitalizing our space, because almost the whole world has taken the leap, and we are already lagging behind in terms of our ability to provide services. For example, we still do not have a 5G player in the market, whilst other countries already have people who are doing 5G. So for those who don't know, 5G is a higher, a service provision model for mobile internet, where you can even have higher speeds. It's like how we used to have 2G back in the day, and it went to 3G, and then it went to 4G. We don't even have a 5G player in the space. So the conversation must go just beyond fiber optics to what are we doing as a nation to ensure that every corner of this country has access to the internet, just as we want access to electricity and water? Because Francis, if you move into a new area, for example, one of the biggest considerations you would have is whether that area has good internet or not. It has now become a matter of necessity, because everything from how you eat to how you sleep, even now how you worship, which is one of the biggest things Ghanaians care about, now depends on the internet. You have the internet powering almost all our industry, apart from maybe the very rudimentary activities like subsistence agriculture. You need internet for virtually everything, for education, for everything. So we cannot even, the fact that it is even, important as a backbone, it's a non-starter. It is the major prerequisites, just like we want roads, just like we want everything. And even in this case, we are talking about the fact that now people are relying on internet to do remote work, both in country and outside the country. If we want to evaluate the number of people whose jobs were disrupted, Uber drivers, food delivery people, even schools, that is distance learning institutions, couldn't run any of their services over the weekend just because of these disruptions. The impact has been humongous. One of the things that I would love journalists to do would be even to do a small documentary to highlight some of the losses that happen to people in various sectors, so that it becomes a source of learning material for us to understand that the digitization that we are talking about is not a matter of just opening apps or developing apps here and there, but actually how our daily lives are enhanced by some of these infrastructure being ubiquitous. Because it is like telling me that you have a road, but the road is in a remote area. That is not important to me. What is important to me is, can I move from where I am to any other destination smoothly, safely, securely, and fast? Which is the most important thing that is required for any infrastructural backbone.
All right. Salam, thank you. And I thank you for joining us tonight on the show. Very great insights you've shared with us. We're grateful. Vice President for Human Africa. Same question I'm asking you, Derek, here. There's been talk about, the country is on a big digitalization drive. But this incident shows us that we need a stronger base, that in the event of all these problems that we're having, that drive will not be hampered.
Yeah, but just in simple sense, what it literally means is that most of the things that governments can do, specifically when it's talking about digitization, is services. But the service cannot be services if there's no base to hold the service to be able to be a service. So if you have a situation where maybe you've launched an app, you basically are saying that we can be able to use our Ghana card here, we can be able to use to do this there, and then
QR code to buy watch,
here, and all of those experiences or launch of those services that we've seen. All of these are a subset of a major infrastructure, or basically they are all like small subsets of a major round table upon which all of these services come and sit on. And we should not just take our eyes off that infrastructure or that base whilst we focus fully on just the services. So when we talk about the services, then we should also talk about the base that would hold the services. They are also very important conversations for us to have. And I've been saying all morning that customers have bought credit. They don't care who is a submarine cable. They don't care who is GHOne. They don't care who is wax SAC3. They don't need all of those things. All they want is that they bought credit and it should work. But you see, sometimes also education is important. So that's why I've said it's almost a scenario where GridCo is giving capacity to ECG for ECG to distribute the power to our homes. Yeah. In this case, the submarine cables are also providing capacity to the telcos, and the telcos are playing them back into data and voice services, which we are also using as consumers. So it's important that government works with the sector. Thankfully, it's good to know, you've heard about this Ghana Internet Exchange Program.
Yes.
Finally, it's becoming a thing that is being hammered a lot more, and we are being able to see, hopefully, that it becomes one of the great data repository units that in future, in case of incidents like this, they are very common sites that everybody continuously visits. So caching is a thing where, when you use your laptop or use your phone, even if you turn it to airplane mode and you open Google, it will open.
Yeah.
But it does not mean that you have the internet.
Yeah.
But it's just stored data that can allow you to move through certain major pages that you probably often go to. And also the regulator, the ministry, has to also work with some of these content developers or content delivery providers to be able to bring their data centers closer to the market or closer to the region, so that in times like this, we might not necessarily need to use excess internet or use a lot more of the internet to get to them, but we'll have some of these existing data right within our data points within our network, so that even when there's an outage, we can be able to have certain access to certain level of access to services that we need. Yeah.
Thank you, Derek, for your time and for joining us this evening. We've learned a great deal. So certainly, we're told within the next 5 weeks, things should be better at the very least. We're hoping that things get well. And then the major learnings from this episode must be clear, so that when it happens again, we'll be able to respond much better than we have now. That'll be it for tonight. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the entire team. Have a great evening.